This is indeed a joyous night for the human spirit. This is your victory too. You helped end apartheid. You stood with us through the transition.
This was Nelson Mandela shortly after he won the presidency of South Africa. As a leader for the African National Congress, he helped bring an end to racial apartheid in that country, a feat for which he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He has been described as being a great and wise negotiator, idealistic, pragmatic, practical, charming, courteous, attentive, enigmatic, and private. This could be called a description of Nelson Mandela's personality. What does it mean to have a personality? What determines our personality? Are our personalities something we inherit at birth or something we develop through our life experiences? Social scientists have developed many theories to try and determine where personality comes from. Of these theories, there are currently three major ones: psychoanalytic, humanistic, and social cognitive perspectives. We will explore these three theories by applying some of their aspects to a well-known person, Nelson Mandela. How did an extraordinary personality such as Nelson Mandela develop?
When I think of Nelson Mandela, I think of the uniqueness of his life. I can't think of anybody else in world history, any part of world history, who went through the kind of transformation that he went through. He was born in 1918 at a time where he's living in a country in which his own people, black Africans, represented well over 80% of the population. Yet they had virtually no political voice. Mandela himself never voted in a government election until 1994. He was in prison from 1964 virtually continuously till 1990. Yet in his own country in 1990, Africans still did not have the vote. It was as if nothing had changed, and in many ways things had gotten much worse. Yet in a mere 4 years from the moment he stepped out of prison, he was president of the country.
Nelson Mandela emerged from Robben Island as a true hero. He was a symbol, I think, for a long time, and there was really a concern whether, when he came out of Robben Island, his symbolic stature would be tarnished by the reality of life. But he lived up to his hero status and exceeded it, I think, in most people's minds.
Was Nelson Mandela born to be a leader, or was it the events and circumstances of his life that shaped him?
With regard to personality, it's important to consider the question of heredity and environment. And basically, personality theorists agree across the board that we're all born with some of the elements of personality, but the rest of the elements of personality we learn through our interaction. The interaction that takes place when we express what we're born with, and other people respond to it.
There is no one theory that adequately explains all aspects of human personality. Every theory has its own strengths and weaknesses.
The purpose of studying personality is to understand individual differences. You know, we tend to like to think of people as all the same. We know that's not true, and people are really very different.
One of the most influential figures in the study of human personality was Dr. Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund Freud was a Viennese physician. He lived around the Victorian era from about 1859 to 1939. And basically, he treated a lot of disturbed patients who seemed to have a similar theme in terms of repressed sexuality and conflicts around that repressed sexuality, which was very understandable given the Victorian time.
Psychoanalytic theory was founded by Sigmund Freud, and ultimately he settled on this kind of triumvirate of dividing our psyche into three different sections: the id, the ego, and the superego.
The id is the primitive part of the personality that is present at birth and is totally unconscious. Its drives are irrational, impulsive, and illogical. The ego is the conscious part of our personality that regulates the id and acts as the mediator between the id's instinctual demands and the realities of the outer world. The superego, which develops around the age of 5 or 6, is the further development of the consciousness that places moral and societal controls on the personality. Freud saw personality and behavior as the result of a constant interplay among these conflicting psychological forces. Psychoanalysis stresses the importance of unconscious mental processes.
What set his theory apart was that he developed basically a theory that looked at personality function in terms of a biological development that is stage and linear oriented. And interestingly enough, and these are some of the things that I think are really brilliant of Freud, he formulated that, the development of personality along this very clear biological time schedule.
Freud called this biological time schedule the psychosexual stages of development. He saw the two primary motivating forces for human behavior were sexual and aggressive energies. During the first 5 years of life, the child passes through the oral, anal, and phallic psychosexual stages. The latency stage occurs in late childhood, and the genital stage begins in adolescence.
The mother is the primary object that the infant is attached to at the very beginning. The mother-child bond is a very strong bond, and this is where the child in the oral stage develops things such as security. Both the boy and the girl initially form this bond with the mother. Later on, the father comes in, and the father becomes important in the development of the superego stage. And so the mother and the father interactions with the child are very important in helping the infant form personality tendencies that will occur later in life.
Well, Mandela was one of many children of a father who had 4 wives. The African societies were polygamous, and I don't know the number offhand, but Mandela was the youngest of many children. He had a very tenuous relationship with his father, who was both psychologically and physically distant from him when he was young, and the father died while he was only 9.
One caution I need to say is that it's difficult to really apply theories to people you don't know. I would love to meet Nelson Mandela, but I haven't met him. A lot has been written about him and about his childhood. We don't have the type of rich material that someone from a psychoanalytic framework could really use to make some assessments.
Freud considered mother and father as key figures in being strong determinants in terms of individual differences in personality outcome. All of us, according to Freud, share this, tendency to seek expression of these biological drives in the context of society.
One of the drawbacks of psychoanalytic theory is that it assumes a single mother and a single father. And one aspect of Mandela's life was that he had 4 mothers.
I think that his early childhood experiences helped him a lot with his people skills, and especially, as he notes himself, with his skills with women, because he was the youngest of his father's sons. His biological mother, as well as all of his mothers, lavished a tremendous amount of affection on him, and he traces his ability to communicate very much with not only people in general, but with women in particular to his early experiences.
Each psychosexual stage is associated with certain psychological issues. The oral stage deals with security and insecurity. The anal stage with issues of cleanliness and self-control issues. And the phallic stage deals with control of others. Freud saw each of these stages in association with a cluster of defense mechanisms.
One of the highest levels of defense mechanisms is what we call sublimation. This is where a particular issue is stirred up from one of the psychosexual stages of development, and it is transformed into something that is socially appropriate expression.
Other defense mechanisms include repression, where certain negative thoughts or emotions are completely excluded from one's conscious thought, or denial, which is the failure to recognize the existence of a problem.
In looking at Nelson Mandela's life, he seems to really have